Howdy, folks. My name is Dan Goosen. I'm joined by my beautiful co host.
Ryan Vogel.
And it is very unfortunate you started the stream so early because I was going to discuss something with you. Um, did you hear that I brought on a new hire onto our team?
Really? Who
Yeah,
who is it? Who is it? Wait, what?
yeah. His name is Code Rabbit. He's going to be doing our code reviews.
No way. Wait. So I'm not gonna have to do code reviews anymore?
Hell nah. Yeah, it was long overdue. I don't want to do reviews. You don't want to do reviews. So Code Rabbit is going to do it for us automatically on each PR.
That's insane. That's
Yeah,
that's crazy. Just automatically?
yeah, just like that. You create a PR, it generates a review, and a beautiful poem on top of that.
Wow. That's incredible. How can I find out more about this new intern?
Yeah, this new intern, you can sign up for it for free if you have an open source repo. We have a link for this. What is it? Where is it?
Devlink.run/code rabbit is what you were about to say, but
That's right.
I got too excited and I just had to cut to the chase.
All right.
Anyways, thank you to Code Rabbit for sponsoring our live NextDevs, and thank you to viewers for watching. Anyways, I'll let Goose introduce today's guest.
Yes. Welcome to the stage, Encore founding team, Marcus and
Hey,
Andre. How you guys doing?
we're good. We're over here in Stockholm, enjoying our summer evening, but really excited to be here with you guys.
Awesome. Well, super happy to have you. Let's jump straight into it. Tell us a little bit about Encore and what do you guys do there?
Yeah, sure. Great to be here. So Encore is mainly two things. It started out as a backend framework. Um, Both Marcus and I worked together at Spotify for many years. I was a backend engineer. Marcus was a product manager. I think we felt the frustration of just you really want to ship as quickly as possible, as a startup, and every impediment to that is a problem. And when you're building backends in the cloud, a big part of that these days is dealing with cloud infrastructure. So it's not so much like writing code; it's everything surrounding writing code. Um, and so we felt, okay, we can do something about this. We can make this better. We had some ideas, and we started building out Encore as a backend framework. It's pretty unique in that you can essentially define infrastructure directly in the code, and then we have a cloud platform that can then automatically manage your infrastructure for you in your own cloud account. So that's the two pillars of Encore is the open source framework, super productive, takes away a lot of the platform and infrastructure headaches, and then our cloud platform, which is like the commercial product, which then automates that and is sort of like a Terraform and DevOps replacing DevOps tools like Terraform
Right.
for a lot of companies.
That's cool. That makes a lot of sense. What and we'll do round robin right here. So, what problem for each of you did you like feel so strongly about that like caused like that spark in you to be like, all right, we need to do something about this. What are we gonna do? So we'll start with Andre first, and then Marcus, you can pick up after.
Yeah, I mean, it really was like I was, in the trenches every day. Like I was a staff engineer. I was doing a lot of systems, designing systems, architecting systems. I was part of the company level, like technical architecture group, and uh, over at that point, like 15 years of investment in platform engineering. um, Spotify invests a ton into this in developer productivity and so on. But being in the trenches and building actual systems for end users, it was still like a big chunk of time every time you wanted to build a new feature. It was getting sucked up by like dealing with cloud infrastructure and dealing with like several days would go by where you're just like struggling to get everything working. Like you have everything running locally, works perfectly, and then you try to deploy it to a test environment and you're struggling and it's like, oh, why is this different from running it locally? And then you deploy it to production and it's different a third time, and it just you're constantly banging your head against this, and every time it's different. And this
It
was
always works on my machine.
exactly, once it works on your machine, the problem is solved, right? That's all there is to it.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and so this was just a really frustrating experience because it was a big part of like the feedback loop of shipping quickly. It was getting bogged down in all of this uh, work that wasn't really about the end user. Like you really want as much of your time to be spent on like, okay, how do we make users happier and more satisfied and more uh, being able to use the product more effectively. And here we were just fighting with things which was entirely unrelated to the product. And yeah, it's always been my passion. It's like how do we build something for end users that is delightful, and this was just such a massive headache that I felt like we have to do something about this.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. And for you, Marcus?
Yeah, I mean, we worked really closely together at Spotify for several years on the same sort of problems. And I was on the product side. And like Andre was saying, a big part of the way you want to work is you want to be close to your users, you want to be shipping very often and having very sort of effective learning loops so you can improve the product quickly. And that the sort of annoyance when the sort of the business logic and the development of the features is done, and then the last 90% of hard work getting it out to users is what's sort of taking up a lot of time, ruining that sort of quick iteration and learning loop. It was really frustrating. And then also in sort of rocket ship like Spotify was in those days, there's opportunity sort of everywhere you look. You can go after some sort of improvement that's going to be very material for the business. And when you were in that position and you were sort of you can show the feature working internally, but then you're sort of blocked from sort of really getting it out the door because you have all of these sort of cloud infra related tasks to do. That's really hard for the internal organization, like beyond the engineering org, to navigate and understand and wrap their heads around. So when you're sort of in a product role, you sort of have to get everyone to see that picture and sort of understand why sometimes it may not look like progress, but a lot of work is going in behind the scenes. And again, like that's why we built Encore and why we think what it provides is a much more efficient way of working, where you basically focus on the business logic, and then the platform takes care of automating the setup of all of that infrastructure for you.
Right. So it came from like that personal struggle and the hands-on experience that you had at Spotify, where you're like, okay, I actually see how this needs to be done. There's obviously a problem here because obviously smaller and mid-sized teams don't have the infrastructure and resources that Spotify does. So you're like, hey, this is a technical moat right here. I can create a product for this. That's awesome. And what year was this again?
So I think I wrote the first line of code to Encore in 2016, so it's
Nice.
9 years ago.
Wow,
Um,
that's impressive.
but it's I mean, it's the way it works under the hood is very much about, as we talked about, like being able to define infrastructure directly in code. There's nothing really quite like that. There are some things today that have sort of taken inspiration from Encore, but at the time, this did not exist. And so it was like a lot of things had to be put into place before we could even get to a point where there was something to use, an entirely different way of approaching building backends was for that to be a useful replacement for a company or a startup. Not a lot of things needed to be in place, and they had to be robust and reliable and production ready. And so it took 4 years of doing it sort of on the side while we were still at Spotify, and then the final sort of decision to actually start doing it full time was in mid 2020. So that was when we had like our first company as a customer coming on board. When it was like, okay, this is actually something that is production ready. We can build real world software and ship it much faster. And then from there, it's been a journey to where we are today, obviously. But
To switch to Encore full time.
Yeah, in mid 2020,
I see.
and then we founded the company around it and raised VC backing and built out the team, uh, and so on.
And open sourced the framework. And that's sort of maybe an interesting story where we sort of raised VC money before we had open sourced the framework. I feel like for a lot of these like open source core products, they start as just an open source project and then they grow, and when they hit some sort of significant scale, they can then use that to actually like find investors and build out a product around it. And we sort of did that in reverse, which is a bit weird, but it seems to work just as well.
I'm interested because obviously there's a very strong connotation to like open source nowadays, with like a lot of open source sponsorship programs and everything like that. But there's always been this sort of like thing where it's like, if you open source your project, you're just helping the community more, rather than, instead of giving away like a free product, you're just making it more transparent, making your company more trustable and whatnot. Have you, what's your take on like how software should be open source? Because I know there's a lot of controversy going around these days where it's like, should I open source this project, or should I keep it closed source, and just, should I charge money for my open source and then have a self-hostable version but then have a non-self-hostable version? It's like, what should I do? What's your experience in that?
Ooh, it's a very difficult question. I think what we have seen is open source has been massively beneficial to us. Um, it's a bit of a cliche, but I mean, you really build software these days on the shoulders of, you know, thousands and thousands of other libraries that you depend on, and I think it is nice to be able to contribute back to that. Uh, we, I think part of the reason why we sort of did it in the other way is, as much as like we are really passionate about doing right by developers and startups and the companies that we serve, and our paying customers on the cloud product that we have and so on. But I mean, we started from a passion of like, okay, we actually want to build something that's better, um, and so the truth, and I think a lot of companies appreciate that, is like, well, if we don't have a sustainable business, we cannot achieve that. You know, as much as we care and we want this to be useful, we also need it to be a sustainable business, because otherwise we don't have the resources to keep building this amazing open source project. And so I think the difficult sort of how to navigate that, I think, is the biggest challenge. And I feel like every open source project is unique in that respect. It's like, okay, um, I think a lot of software engineers maybe start out being very sort of caring very deeply about open source, but I think you also come to appreciate that, like, well, you do need to be able to make money on this somehow. What worked really well for us was um, having a clear separation between, okay, this is the open source product, here's the cloud platform. The cloud platform is essentially designed around the framework, and so we essentially use the revenue we make from the cloud platform to be able to further the development of the framework, and it becomes a very symbiotic relationship. It also feeds very well into like what we've been doing more recently with Leap and AI, which I'm sure we'll get into, but that's also based on the framework itself. So now we have like two products that essentially are based on the open source framework, and sort of provide more value to companies that are using the framework. And so I think that's like a good place to start. It's like, okay, the open source thing needs to stand on its own. It needs to be useful and valuable. And then the for companies that want, you know, more, uh, you have the option to sort of opt in to paying us for like added services. I don't know if you have more thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, just to add, like from the user's point of view, like who like how do you figure out if you can trust something, right? And if it's open source and there's no sort of one-way doors and no lock-in, then it's a lot easier to trust it because you know where you're getting yourself in for. So that's been like a very key part in just getting people excited about the framework and getting people to trust it, that they can actually um, see exactly how it works, and they can try it out and know that, oh, even if we choose to use the platform, there's other ways of continuing to sort of use the framework even if we don't want to do that, and they can figure out all of that before they need to commit to anything, and that's been really important. um, and I think just overall, like, we don't really believe in trying to get people to sort of be locked into your little world, um, and that's like another thing we're excited about for the future. The bigger the open source community gets around the framework, um, the greater the chance that other people build other products and tools that are designed around it, so the people who use it get even more benefit from the fact that they are using the framework, like we've seen with other sort of back and front end frameworks. So that's really exciting, just like getting the community to contribute not just to the open source project directly, but building things designed around it.
More like an ecosystem of
Exactly.
Yeah.
tools.
Yeah, that makes sense. So curious, Andrew, what did you work on at Spotify?
Um, so I was a staff engineer on Spotify Premium for
Hmm.
a lot of time. So all things Spotify Premium, a lot of payments things, subscription things, and then I did a lot of like technical strategy and systems design and architecture. Uh, Most of that was on sort of backend and cloud. I did a lot of uh, like Go tooling for this for Spotify. So for the Go programming language, which uh, we use a lot internally. Um, and then I worked on other parts of the company in the sort of last 3 years around smart speakers and royalties and things like that.
Nice. So you and Marcus, you guys worked together on the same team, correct?
Yeah.
For several years, yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. So did you like come up with the idea together, or who like owned the idea?
I mean, it was definitely your baby to begin with. So it's Andre's side project, and then as it sort of matured, you sort of roped me into it, which I mean, I feel like that's. I don't know. You talk to a lot of people. What's the most common thing? Is it one person has the idea and finds people to work with, or is it common that two people come up with an idea together?
It's mostly how we've seen it. It's where, like you said, one person has the side project, and then they call up their buddy and they say, "Hey, I'm not going to pay you, but come work on my project, and we'll have fun." So it's like a required labor, but then that kind of just they both sort of visualize that project, and they're like, "Hey, this could actually be something," and it kind of just goes from that. But it normally goes from like one guy's side project, and
Yeah.
then he calls over his buddy and says, "Hey, come work with me. You're not going to get paid. You're not going to get anything extra, but it'll be fun. Trust me."
Yeah. Co-founders is like you have to have a very special relationship, right? You have to trust the person, you have to know how to work with them. It's not like you're gonna walk up to a stranger in the street like, "Hey, you want to be my co-founder?" Right? So this is the most like natural transition from what we've seen.
Yeah, and I think like that was probably why was willing to sort of make the leap and co-found Encore together with Andre, just because we had worked together for a really long time, and um, you sort of know the good, and if there are bad sides, you know those two, so you know what you can expect, which was really good
Yeah,
for us.
sure. So Andrew, I'm curious, like, do you have like an exact point in your time at Spotify where you're like, okay, I'm done. I'm so tired of this infra stuff. I need a solution for this. Was there a particular challenge or issue you were solving?
I mean, I think Spotify was very early to the cloud. Um, it was for Google Cloud Platform. Spotify was like the first big customer. So that's how early it was. Um, AWS had existed for a couple of years at this point, but um, and and so a lot of the tooling was still in its sort of infancy. Like Terraform was very new, um, and the adoption across the company was very uneven. Um, but I remember we were we were in the process of rolling out like a big new feature, and we had a team of, I want to say, like 7 or 8 very experienced engineers who were like owning this feature and they were building it out. And I was sort of, as a tech lead, like I wasn't writing a lot of the code, but I was more on the like architecture side and doing that sort of thing. And I remember like checking in with the tech, like the team lead on the tech side, and they were like, "We have been like the product is done, but we have been struggling with like getting permissions working in production for the last 3 days." Um, and these are people who at this point, they're very experienced. They have 10+ years of experience, and this is it's such a small part of what you should be doing, and it takes up so much time. Uh, so I started thinking like, okay, well, like why is it that we as engineers have to do this ourselves? Why, like, whether you're clicking around in a cloud console yourself or you're writing Terraform to sort of automate it for you, like why is it that we as engineers have to do that work in the first place? Like, why doesn't our tools just understand like, okay, well, if you're creating this database, like, of course you need permission to use it. Um, this seems like a problem that can be automated. Um, but I realized, like, in order to do that, in order to automate things like that, you need the software, like you need your tools to understand like the architecture of your system, so that the tool can understand like, okay, so you have this backend service over here that needs a database. The database does not exist, so we need to create the database, and then this service needs to access it. So then we need to create like a username and a password and store that securely somewhere. And when the service starts up, it needs to get that password and then establish a connection and so on. And the problem with this is, to do that level of automation, you need to understand not just what exists, but also like what should exist. And that's really like, that only existed in engineers' heads. That's the architecture, that's um, this like system diagram. Um,
It's like that grounding method. It's like, okay, should this actually be something, or is this just an overcomplication or an oversimplification of another problem? Right.
yeah, like if you ask like an engineer to describe a system, they're going to go to a whiteboard and they're going to draw like boxes and arrows and say like, okay, so this thing is talking to that thing, and that thing is then sending messages to this other thing. And like, that level of understanding is only in the heads of engineers. Um, but if we had that level of understanding, then we could automate all of these things.
Yeah.
And so because I was like quite senior and like part of like the company level technical strategy groups, I actually was advocating for this internally. Like, we need to build something like this internally. Um, for and I was pushing for this for like a year, but it's, Spotify at that point had like 8,000 backend services. No one knew exactly how many, um, and it's a big commitment to like rewrite all of that. And so there's like a lot of sort of momentum that makes it very difficult to come up with like a new approach that would sort of take away that pain point. And so
Yeah.
eventually I just decided like, okay, well, if we're not going to do it here, then I'm going to do it on my own.
Have you ever had that sort of same like realization with like Encore where you're like, okay, we have this massive rewrite that we need to do, but let's just do it and rip the band-aid off because I know it will help us in the future. What's like been one of like the biggest architectural rewrites that you've done, and like why did you do it?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it has been in that sort of framing is like, okay, like we're constantly thinking like, okay, how can we understand more about the system? Uh, because that's been like our guiding star is the more we understand about the system, the more value we can provide through automation. So a lot of it, like very early on, was just starts and stops of like, how do we design this thing? Like, how do we design the framework to actually work with in a way that's both like easy to use, but also provides the ability to sort of analyze to actually build up this very rich understanding. So in the beginning, it was a lot of that, like, okay, no, we need to start over, we need to redesign this feature and so on, just to get it just right in order to be able to pull out all of that information from the system.
Yeah, but I think if on a slightly sort of higher level, bigger sort of bets for the company that have been, I don't want to call them pivots, but sort of big, bold new bets. There's been two big ones, I think, in our journey. And for some context, when we started off, the Encore framework was only available for Go. And our vision back then was basically that we used game engines as a sort of simile where they provide all the tools you need to build the games. You have Unity and Unreal Engine, and you sort of pick a game engine not based on, oh, this one provides these programming languages. You think more in terms of what are the tools you get out of it that let you build games, right? And our vision was very much that we could create that level of experience for building backend systems and application. So we started off only supporting Go, and we basically had the idea that if we provide enough value, enough tooling, people are not really going to care about the programming language. They're going to pick Encore for the benefits, and they're going to be fine using Go. And then over the first sort of year or two after founding the company and really starting to grow it, we sort of realized that, like, in theory that might make sense, but in practice people have a lot of sort of opinions about programming languages, even if they're just irrational sometimes. Like in a lot of cases, like it doesn't really matter which language you use. And then there are some rational reasons, of course, like maybe you have a team that already knows something, or you have other systems that use some languages. So the first big shift, the big new bet we had to make was that we were going to support more languages. So about, I want to say like just over a year ago, we launched our second sort of framework, which is Encore for TypeScript. And over the course of founding the company, TypeScript really took off as a language, and I'm sure you know, like it's taken over the internet almost, it feels like. So we really sort of decided like we're gonna move away from our original sort of vision of just supporting one language, and that was like a material change for how the product works and all, and so what we need to support and provide as a team. So we bet on that, and we sort of put out a TypeScript framework, and very quickly that became much more sort of used than the Go framework. So that's been like really successful for us. And we're happy about that. And now we're still maintaining both, and we're basically have parity between them, and that's our plan going forward as well. We think they complement each other in a good way. So we have a lot of our users are asking for like building apps using both and mixing and matching and having features around that. So that's really exciting. And then the second big shift, the big bet we made was just this year when we started building an entirely new product on top of the framework, which is Leap, which is our basically AI developer agent that you can use to build full stack applications using the Encore framework and then deployed using the Encore platform.
So you mentioned maintaining parity between the two, TypeScript and Go is the case. Are you doing this manually right now?
Yeah, I mean, they are quite like they're quite similar in philosophy, but the implementations are very different. Go is entirely written in Go. The TypeScript framework is written in Rust primarily, and so if we add support for additional languages, the plan going forward is those languages will also be supported by the Rust sort of core runtime
I
that is
see.
designed to be able to support multiple languages, but the Go one is very specific to Go.
Yeah. You guys using AI to help you with the maintenance overhead? Maybe Leap?
I mean, definitely, I think more and more every day that passes, I think the the models get so much better with every month that passes that it's pretty remarkable. Um, so yeah, I think even to this day, like we're a team of 6 people, and being able to just both maintain, keep developing, adding new features on all 3 pillars, the framework, uh, or 2 frameworks, the cloud platform and Leap, and also serving like customer demands and requests and support. Um, we would never be able to do that without AI at this point. Like we're so much more productive now than when we started.
Yeah.
Have you seen like the trend of your AI, your like actual being able to get work done with AI go up with like these new models being released? Because like that's always what's talked about, where it's like, well, whenever the new model is released, everyone's productivity goes up 10,000% or whatnot. Have you seen that sort of like online performance boost, or how do you actually like use AI, like in your actual day to day?
I think the um, new models are definitely getting better. I think it's in a couple of different ways. Sometimes they're getting cheaper, sometimes they're getting faster, sometimes they're getting like, better at not hallucinating. Uh, Sometimes they're getting better at like following instructions, even when like with lots of context. They don't tend to be like forget things as quickly. And so there are a lot of like subtle things that are like difficult to reason about. Um, uh, the other thing is, I mean, they're very capable of writing high quality code. But I think our thesis so far is like models are getting better, but the bigger opportunity is actually in like the user interfaces around the models themselves. Like when it comes to like developer agents, I think Cursor was like the first big one that really took off, and now I think Claude Code has largely sort of surpassed that, and just it, you know we as an industry are still experimenting with like what's the user interface that we want for interacting with AI. How do we effectively scale AI to handle large code bases? And I think that's where the opportunity is much bigger. I mean, that's very much what like we're trying to solve with Leap is like, okay, how do we actually? It's the models themselves are already good enough if you give them the right context. But the problem is like that's the difficult part is like how do you do that?
So curious, I don't think we captured that really, but how do you guys split responsibilities, like historically and today throughout the course journey?
I mean, Andre is definitely the sort of technical lead and visionary for everything we do, and then like we collaborate a lot on like what is the product direction, what's the product vision, coming at it from slightly different angles. You sort of have your when developing a framework, like it's very important that you sort of create your own sort of idioms and that there's like a consistent taste, I guess is one way of putting it. And Andre is like in charge of that, so he's like the creative director of the frameworks. And then in terms of like what are the broader like opportunities we should go after, and what are the features we should provide to our users, that's very collaborative. And I'm coming at it maybe more from a sort of, I guess, like user-centric and user research type of angle to provide that perspective and sort of marry that up with Andre's sort of own strong opinions and sort of visions. And I think that's been very successful so far, in that like whenever you're creating something new, you need to have a strong perspective of what's like what it's going to be, but you definitely need to have sort of some sort of surface area, of course, with your users, and a good process for how you sort of respond to feedback.
Grounded in reality.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes, at least. And then beyond that, like as we said before, like we're still a very small company. We're 6 people, so to some extent, like we both do everything all the time.
I think like a very, as you say, like I think it's been true in both like at large companies, like when we worked at Spotify together, as well as smaller companies like what we're doing now. I think a really healthy dynamic is like a bit of conflict and tension between these two. Like that's how you sort of, oftentimes they are in conflict with one another. Like going back to like the open source question, it's like, well, the more value you give away open source, the happier people are going to be, but you also need to create a sustainable business. Those things are fundamentally in conflict. And so having, and same thing on like, okay, how do we balance short term and long term? How do we balance like product and business and technology? Being able to have like different perspectives, where we worked together now for like 12 plus years.
Yeah.
Wow.
So being able to have that level of trust, where like, okay, even if we have differing opinions, we trust each other, and we know like we're well intentioned and we want the same thing. So let's just talk this through until we reach a good conclusion. That's always been a good recipe for sort of productive discussions, I think.
Yeah. So, do you guys fight? Do you guys have conflicts?
I mean, all the time, but that's the point, right? Like we sort of welcome that tension, and I think the worst you could do if you found a company with someone, the worst you could do is be polite, because that's not going to lead to any good outcomes. Like you need to be very candid, as much as you can, and then still obviously maintain a good relationship.
Yeah.
Not sure. I mean, depends on what you mean by fighting. I don't think we've ever yelled at each other, for example. Well, okay, maybe.
Maybe those late Friday nights when production still is down, the emotions get a little bit more on us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it's also like, yeah, building a company, even when it's going well, like there are ups and downs. You win deals, you lose deals, you work on something for months and it doesn't pay off, and it's like having people who you trust, who can, like, if I have a bad day, maybe you have a better day. And if I come to work and I'm super frustrated, maybe you can sort of take on more of that, or sort of, yeah, it's good to balance both the ups and the downs.
Yeah, you got to have balance, because otherwise it just wouldn't work out if there wasn't balance. And you see that in a lot of startups and companies, where one person just tries to control way too much and the other person just kind of lets it happen, and it works out okay for the first couple of years, but with time it's just not a proper solution. But what we're going to do is we're going to jump forward to this AI era of Leap. And it's, if I recall, the domain is leap.new.
Yep.
Just give us the. I know you kind of talked about it a little bit, but give us like the elevator pitch for what Leap actually does.
So what it does today is it lets you build full stack applications with real backends and real cloud infrastructure without writing code. So using AI, you write prompts and it generates the code. Um, and then because it's using Encore, you get all of the infrastructure defined as part of the code base. So you can then, if you want, use the Encore platform to deploy the application to your AWS or GCP account. So you're not locked to a Supabase or something like that. You can build for any scale using whatever sort of cloud services you want to use. And we sort of think of it as intent-driven development. That's sort of the direction we're going, moving towards as an industry. So um, we think building software is going to be less and less about the code, and that's going to become more of an implementation detail. And we're moving towards intent, and we think Leap is the first really capable AI product where you can express your intent and you can get an actual sort of production-ready application that you can get deployed to real sort of cloud infrastructure.
You can just take
So
it open source and like run it yourself.
Yeah.
Like it's not, it's very much like take it and do what you want with it. And like we talked about earlier, like the cloud platform part of it is there if you want it for deploying to the cloud, but you can also just take it and run it yourself.
that's incredible. So you produce also the infrastructure as code necessary to run it on whatever cloud provider.
Yeah, so that's like the premise of Encore is the
Yeah.
AI generates code. The code itself describes all of the necessary infrastructure. So if the code needs a database, that will be defined in the code itself. If you need PubSub, it's in the code. If you need object storage, it's in the code. And so we have taught the AI model how to use all of these concepts so that uh, basically whatever your intention is, the Leap will generate something that actually delivers on that and it works. And it works in Leap, it works when you run it locally, it works when you deploy it to the cloud. We can, through our cloud platform, we can deploy it to all clouds like AWS, GCP, preview environments, and so on. Uh, and so the same code just works in lots of different environments. And that's sort of like where the benefits of Encore come into play in like the AI era.
Interesting. So are you producing like Pulumi or Terraform templates?
No, so this is just like Encore as a backend framework has all these concepts. It can
Mm.
spin that up on the fly. Uh, and then through our cloud platform, we have like an infrastructure orchestration system that will take that and produce all of the, like we integrate directly with the cloud providers APIs. So it's not generating Pulumi to do that. It's
Very
powered by Encore.
interesting. Very
So it's like
interesting.
you built the back end and then you built the essentially the AI agent that utilizes that back end to the best of its ability. Yeah, I think that's a pretty common pipeline. Um, and now I'm interested. How long has Leap been out for?
Well, we're getting to like 2.5 months.
How is like that adoption, like the time to first like usage or whatever, like either increased or decreased by like an order of magnitude? Like, has it exponentially increased like the time that it takes to get something up and running, or has it been like just like a double time as fast? Or what have your initial observations of the platform been like that?
In terms of what it enables for our users.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on what you were doing before, right? So we have a lot of our Encore customers, they're using Cursor, they're using Cloud Code with the framework, and then they're already extremely productive. But if you're not in that ecosystem already, then like it's pretty incredible. You can spin up with Leap like a distributed system. You can build like an event-driven application using PubSub in like minutes, and then get that stood up on AWS. So it's incredibly powerful. And what we've seen, like we spent the past 4 years like building Encore and providing that framework, and I think we've seen in the first 2 months of Leap, we've seen about 4 times as many people are using Encore as a result than in the past 4 years. So the amount of people who are discovering the framework and are starting to use it has just exploded.
Okay, so there are a bunch of AI app builders out there, right? There's Lovable, there's V0, Bolt, Replit, Convex Chef. What is your differentiator? What is special about your offering?
It's really the focus on like actual backend concepts. It's being able to not just build a prototype, but a real world application that you can actually deploy and have it scale to actual users. I mean, we have Encore applications that serve billions of requests per month. That's It's not for building toys; it's for building products. And there are a lot of benefits that Leap provides, and through Encore, it's like things like end-to-end testing, it's API documentation, it's like observability integrations, and all of these things that really benefit people who care about the software they're building, and doesn't like treat it as like a throwaway demo or prototype, right?
So it's more like architectural rather than like vibe. Like, okay, this might actually not accomplish what you're doing on purpose because we're only reaching within the limits of what we know, type thing, right?
I mean, it depends on how you look at vibe coding. Like some people would look at Leap and think it is vibe coding. It depends on like what your perspective is. I think where we see Leap being different is it is for building real applications. It's for building real software. Uh, it doesn't require you to be technical, but it definitely benefits from being technical because that's how you can sort of guide it even more effectively to do things in the way that if you have an opinion on the architecture, you can express that, and Leap will sort of follow what you want it to be. If you're less technical, it will come up with something that makes sense from the perspective of like how Encore works.
Awesome. So, do you know about Convex Chef?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, would you say that it does sort of the same thing, but you guys also give a little bit more visibility into the infrastructure, the primitives below it all?
I mean, I think Chef is probably one of the better ones out there of the other options. I think the big difference there is still that you're basically locked to a backend as a service platform, and that comes with limitations and comes with certain risks. What we're doing with Leap is basically that we're providing something that we think even enterprise customers can use, because they can build applications and they can deploy them to their existing cloud environments if they're on AWS or GCP or whatever. And that comes with a ton of benefits, but it basically makes it viable for non-technical people to build applications on top of existing data in a large organization and unlock sort of the value there. And that's very difficult to do if you're basing your entire sort of premise on a backend as a service platform.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we got about 10 minutes left, so we're gonna sort of bring it all in and wrap it in together. Um, we'll go back to like the business OSS funding and stuff like that because that's a big issue that people run into. They're like, okay, I want to make money off my open source project, not to become a trillionaire, but just so that way I can live and like not die, um, and be like be able to afford housing. So how would you, if you were starting over and not doing your weird inverse thing, if you had like an open source framework, how would you sort of pivot into that like funding model where it's like, I need to get paid? How can I do this without screwing my users? How can I do this without turning into like an enterprise thing? What would you give as advice for that?
Yeah, it, I think it depends on what you want to do. So it sounds like what you're describing is you don't want to take the VC track, and because what comes with that is basically you need to build a very large business. But if you just want to get paid and be able to keep maintaining the open source project, I would go to the top users of that open source uh, product and just spend as much time as you can with them to understand like what else, like what's something related to this that they would be willing to pay for, because then it's going to be very connected to what you already provide and the the project that you're already passionate about maintaining, and you're going to get probably better ideas for how to improve that, but you're also going to find ideas where maybe there's something here which doesn't make sense to provide as part of the open source product, but sort of uses it and is connected to it in a very clear way.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like not it's like you're kind of like almost pleading them like, hey, I will keep providing this amazing level of support. Just throw me like a couple $100 a month to as like a license fee or whatnot, or even just custom implement like a custom feature for them so that way they could pay. Is kind of what you're saying?
I guess yeah. What I'm saying is, I'm sure those models could work as well. But I'm saying uh, when you're already providing something that people are using, there's probably something some idea they have already for how that could be extended, and it's very likely that you could provide those things in a commercial way. It might be that there's something that requires setup or some authentication or some centrality to it that can't be distributed as part of the open source product. You can do them a favor by just providing that as a service, and they already have a trust relationship with you as you are the maintainer of the open source project, and that would be a clear like win-win. They would get something they've sort of requested, and they wouldn't have to do any work to set it up, and you could sort of basically charge for the convenience of getting that.
Yeah. So a big part in building successful business around open source software is building a community. And I know you guys have 10,000 stars on GitHub, a little bit over. You have a Discord, you have a Twitter. Um, I'm really curious to hear what has been your approach on growing your community and sort of incentivizing people to keep investing their time in your product.
I mean, it's a really tough one. Um, I mean, we're what's been most effective, I think, is like being good at um, basically providing visibility for people who are contributing in a positive way, and that could be uh, whenever we do like community calls and things like that we actually like showcase like oh, these are our new contributors, or like these are our most helpful users in the Discord who are answering people's question, that you basically give people visibility. A lot of people involved in open source, they they are involved because they want to be part of the community, they want to become known in the community, and when you have a project that a lot of people are part of and are looking at, that's like one of the tools you have that you can sort of put a spotlight on individual contributors. You can give them sort of the awareness of the group, and that can help them build sort of their reputations in the open source community. And that when people see that happening, more people want to be part of it, and more people want to contribute and have a chance of like being part of that.
I think another thing we've seen is we we have like very we spend a fair amount of our time like trying and supporting, you know, our developers and users on Discord. Um, we don't tie that to like a support agreement, or we don't charge any money for that. For companies who are paying customers, we do offer that as well, but anyone is welcome into Discord, and we will do our best to answer their questions. Um, and you never know like who is this person behind this nickname. But we've seen so many examples where uh, providing a good experience and a good sort of being helpful builds a lot of trust and credibility that then becomes the selling point almost in and of itself. That sort of pushes people from, okay, this seems promising, to, okay, I had such a good positive experience, they were so helpful, they fixed the issue or gave me uh, a workaround in minutes, that they feel like, okay, I will take a bet on using this. And I think that is true both for uh, just open source in general, as well as a way to sort of get companies to actually pay for something on top of the open source product. So for us, that's been a massive sort of has a massive impact. We've seen that, you know, 10s, 20 times where, you know, people come back and like, oh no, actually your support was the main reason why we felt that we could trust this and actually go for it, and we're so happy with the result.
Right. Yeah, they're doing it for the founders itself rather than like the actual product. That they would be like, oh, we don't even actually care what product you have. We're just gonna go to you because we know that you're gonna provide top tier support. You're gonna always provide solutions. You're always gonna provide workarounds and be there for me as the client. But yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. So as we got a couple minutes wrapping up, we always ask this question on here, and Encore's been around for 10 years. If you could go back 10 years from today and give yourself a different piece of advice or something you would do differently, what would you do differently?
One piece of advice to yourself. You guys can go one by one. Seems like Andrew really wants to go right now. So, Andrew, why don't you
I
start?
want to go. I mean, I think the big, like we've made, like Marcus said, like we made two, not pivots, but very impactful decisions um, in our journey. So the first one was this decision to go beyond Go and add support for TypeScript and probably more languages in the future. Like we're gonna do Python too. Um, and the second one was to actually like start building Leap and invest in it. Um, and I think when you're building a company, like new things will pop up on your radar. And we were quite like, okay, you always have to ask yourself, like, should we jump on this bandwagon? Like, is AI just a fad? Is it going to be the next big thing? Should we be investing in this? I think that in some sense is like the hardest part of building a company. It's like hindsight is always 2020. Like you can like, oh, that was the right decision, that was the wrong decision.
Right,
And
yeah.
I think it was definitely the wrong decision to wait as long as we did. Like both of those decisions were the right ones, but we should have done them sooner. um, I read this book by the founder of Intel called Andy Grove. I think it's called High Output Management. but he relates a story where Intel, they most people know them for CPUs, but they were doing memory in the beginning, and then they were like the business was struggling, and so the two founders were like talking with themselves and was like, okay, well, like if the board were to fire us uh, and replace us with new CEO and leaders, like what's the first thing the new management would do? And both of them instantly were like, well, we would like they would get out of the memory business and only do CPUs. And then they're like, well, like we should just not get fired and we should just do that. And then they started the new strategy the next day. And so we actually had the same conversation where I related this to Marcus, this story, and we were both like, no, we need to add TypeScript. And then we went and did that.
Nice.
But I think, yeah, we should have done both of those things sooner. But it's so difficult to know when you should be fast and when you should be more cautious.
Yeah, analysis paralysis. I understand. What about you, Marcus?
Yeah, I mean, my head's in the same place, but my short version would be take more risk.
Yeah, you can just do things. Go and take risks. Awesome. All right, let's wrap it up here. So, 1 minute plug segment. Shout out any work, any links, any profiles out there that you want people to go check it out to see your work. Encore, Leap, etc.
Yeah, go to leap.new to check out Leap and encore.dev to check out Encore.
That was quick. Wow, record time. Awesome.
They
Love
know
it.
their pitch. Yeah, I love it. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on. It was a great episode. I learned so much. It was really, really interesting to hear about your journey and all the ebbs and flows of everything. Yeah, so thank you so much for coming on. Yeah, it was a pleasure having you.
Yeah, likewise. Really good to be on the show.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Thank you very
Of
much.
course. Awesome. And once again, thank you for CodeRabbit for sponsoring all NextDev Lives. And thank you to the viewers who are watching this either live or on YouTube. And we will see you next time.
Peace.